Welcome. Today, we're going to tackle one of the trickiest parts of academic writing in English, those tiny little words called prepositions. If you've ever stared at a sentence wondering if it should be in, on, or at, then believe me, you're in the exact right place. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to define what the problem really is. Then we'll dig into why we mess them up so much. After that, we'll look at some super common mistakes, and we'll wrap up with some real practical strategies to help you nail them every time. First things first, if you struggle with this, you are not alone, not by a long shot. Even the author of the material we're looking at today, who absolutely loves languages, admits that this has always been a tough one for them personally. I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? It's a feeling so many of us share. And we're not just talking about little slips of the tongue in conversation. These stones in the path actually make their way into formally published, peer-reviewed scientific articles. And look, it's not just a hunch. We've got the data to prove it. A study from back in 2005 confirmed that for people learning English, prepositions are the #1 most frequent source of error in their writing. More than verb tenses, more than articles, prepositions are at the top of the list. Okay, so why? Why are these little words such a nightmare? If we can get to the bottom of this, we can start building some really effective habits to fix it. Well, it really boils down to 3 big reasons. First off, you can't just translate them directly from your native language. The rules just don't line up. Second, one little preposition in English can have like a dozen different meanings. And finally, you have these fixed phrases or collocations where a word is basically glued to a certain preposition and you just have to memorize them. Okay, let's take a super common example of that first point, language interference. If your first language is Portuguese, you say depende de. So it's really tempting to just translate that word for word and write depends of. But that's a classic mistake. In English, the phrase is always, always depends on. And get this isn't some made-up example for a textbook. This exact error, depends of, shows up all the time in actual published scientific papers, like this one from 2016. It's basically a fingerprint of that direct translation habit. All right, let's move on and look at a few other traps you're probably going to run into. Just being able to spot these patterns is a huge first step toward getting rid of them in your own writing. Okay, pop quiz time. Take a quick look at this sentence. This one can actually trip up native speakers too. Can you see what's wrong with the structure here? So what's the deal here? Well, the expression have difficulty has a rule. It has to be followed by a gerund. That's the verb form with an ing at the end. So you should always say difficulty choosing. You might see in choosing, which is also correct, but it's never to choose. Here's another pair that causes a lot of confusion, capable and able. You have to remember they play by different rules. You are always capable of doing something with that ing gerund, but you are able to do something with the infinitive form. And yep, you guessed it, this exact mistake shows up in published papers. In this article, the authors wrote, capable to convert. But as we just saw, the right way to say it would have been capable of converting. Now, pay close attention because this one is huge. The word to is a master of disguise. Sometimes it's part of an infinitive, like to walk, but other times it's a preposition, and when it is, it needs an ing verb after it. So with a phrase like committed to, that to is a preposition. It has to be committed to supporting. And look, here it is again, this time in a 2021 paper. It says committed to replace. The grammatically correct version is committed to replacing. It just goes to show you how sneaky these common errors are and how they can get past even very smart writers and editors. Okay, enough about the problems, right? Let's talk about how to fix them. Let's build your toolkit with some solid, practical strategies for getting these prepositions right. The game plan here is pretty straightforward, and it's got 3 key parts. 1, read a lot and practice constantly. 2, you gotta actively memorize those key word and preposition pairings. And 3, don't be afraid to use modern tools like grammar checkers to catch your mistakes. Honestly, memorizing these common pairs is one of the best things you can do. It's a massive shortcut. For instance, you always focus on something, or a paper consists of different sections. And a really big one for scientific writers is effect on, not effect in, which is a really common slip-up. Now, this is where you can really level up your writing. Once you move beyond single words and start mastering entire prepositional phrases, like in relation to or with respect to, you add a whole new layer of sophistication and clarity to your work. They're like little signposts for your reader. Okay, here's the pro tip for making your writing sound so much better. It's called preposition stacking. It's not necessarily wrong, but when you pile up too many prepositions, your sentences get really clunky and hard to read. Just listen to this. Of the ocean for research into the evolution of. It's just awkward. But look what happens when we clean it up. By changing some of those clunky nouns back into active verbs, the sentence becomes so much stronger. We simulated an ocean model to research. Bam! It's shorter, it's clearer, and it just sounds way more professional. And for our last tip, let's talk about something you'll want to keep in mind for formal, academic writing. In everyday conversation, we end sentences with prepositions all the time, but in a scientific paper, it's better to avoid it. So instead of something you want to know more about, a more polished way to phrase it would be something about which you want to know more. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that these tiny little words have a massive impact. Getting them right isn't just about avoiding mistakes. It's about making your writing clear, precise, and professional. It's about mastering clarity itself. All right, that about wraps it up for us. So we'll leave you with a little something to think about. Which of these tricky preposition combos is your personal stone in the path? And what's one thing you can do this week to start getting better at it? Thanks for joining us.